Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Campbell and this is the Real Review Top Rank Kiwis, a tasting of 8 gold ribbon wines, 3 whites and 5 reds. To order wines and replay tastings, you need to go to cellar door to door by clicking on events. We hear many of you have ordered from wineries, otherwise open a bottle of anything and sip along and join us. I'd like to have an interactive format, so there's a chance to ask questions via the little Q&A box. I'll taste 2 wines and then take a couple of questions and then move on to 2 wines and then more questions. The first wine we're going to talk about tonight is 2019 Astrolabe Taihoa Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough. Actually, it's from Kekarengu, is a sub-district of Marlborough, and that has a retail price of $35. Kekarengu is an interesting area a coastal area between Blenheim and Kaikoura. The winery Astrolabe, or winery owner Simon Waghorn and family, it's about trying to build complexity, texture and age-worthiness into this, which is their flagship Sauvignon Blanc. They've got quite a good range of good Sauvignon Blancs, and this is the top of the pile. It's from an organic, low-cropping coastal vineyard. Well, now, what does that mean? Well, we all know organic is not using any sprays. Low cropping, deliberately going for concentration by sacrificing fruit, and a coastal location can introduce cooling breezes and produce more vibrant wines. It's also got chalk lace soils, which will put a gleam in the eye of many winemakers because that often results in a little bit of very welcome mineral character into the wine. So you might see, if you're tasting this wine, you might see if you can pick up any of that. The fruit is hand-picked, whole bunch pressed, and really lightly pressed. I think they use a sort of champagne style press to deliberately not recover all of the juice, but to get softer, lower phenolic juice. And then it's wild fermented in old 500-litre puncheons. So they're not chasing oak flavour. They're looking for, retaining as much fruit as possible, getting texture into the wines, and a little bit of extra complexity. Let's have a taste of the wine now. Like the label, a minimalist sort of label. Got quite a sort of savoury nose, sort of toasty, nutty characters, I guess, from the lees. The first thing that strikes me when I taste the wine is a lovely rich texture. So you sort of don't expect to get quite that much texture in Sauvignon Blanc. So this is really pushing that texture out as a lot. I like that. That's a very attractive part of the wine. And then it's got it's more savory than fruity. It's got sort of nutty lees, mineral character, and I'm picking up just a little bit of that sort of gunflinty character. Right, it's lovely wine, very well, which is exactly why I gave it 95 points, and it ranked 19 out of 142 2019 Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough. Food match. Well, winemaker owner Simon Waghorn has come up with this match, or suggested range of matches. He claims clam chowder, oysters, soft white cheese, chicken and tarragon pie, and smoked eel. Not all at once. These are alternatives. Are the perfect partners. Natural partner for seafood, particularly oysters. And I can really see that happening. It's got that, I can see that working very well. It's got that slightly taut, acidic, edginess to it that just would be wonderful. I'd have raw oysters just with a garnish of lime juice is my favorite at the moment. Anyway, let's move on now to wine number 2, which is the Landing Chardonnay. I'll pop it on the plinth. The Landing Chardonnay from the Bay of Islands, interestingly, and $48 is the retail price. The Landing was established or produced their first wines in 2007, so fairly recently. It's a small vineyard on a 400-hectare peninsula on the northern mouth of the Bay of Islands. 2019 was the perfect growing season for it's absolutely top vintage for our most northerly wine producers, who sometimes get affected by moist, warm tropical cyclones that come down from the islands and cause havoc in the vineyards. But they didn't get that. Was not the case in 2019. It was a sort of a perfect growing season where they were not under pressure at any time and could let the grapes just ripen till they were physiologically perfect. It's a mix of Chardonnay clones. I won't reel them off, but it's not a single clone wine, and they're grown in grey, wacky clay soils. The clay is that tends to produce richer Chardonnay, so a little bit of richness there will from the clay. It spent 11 months in French oak barriques. 10% of those are new, and very interestingly, it's next to New Zealand's first grapevine ever planted in 1819 by Samuel Marsden. So this is just there, a very historic part of an important part of New Zealand's wine history. 200 years old now, since the first vines went in. And Samuel Marsden said at the time, "New Zealand promises to be very favourable to the vine. Should the vine succeed, it will prove of vast importance to this part of the globe." So that was quite prophetic. And he now, given the fact that wine is the sixth most highest export earner product, that's the highest export earner in the country. So it's come to pass. Let's taste this wine. A little bit of colour there, but quite appropriate for the age of the wine and so forth. Great nose, quite sort of tree fruit and sort of toasty. Delicious, sort of almost opulent palate with I guess it's got sort of grapefruit, citrusy, white peach, toasted nut, ginger from the yeast leaves, I would guess, hazelnut, and a bit of oyster shell, which is appropriate for a seaside vineyard, and nice spicy oak flavors. Quite intense, and certainly a very complex wine that's accessible now, but I think it could handle a bit of moderate cellaring at least. I gave that 95 points, and it ranked 18 out of 133 New Zealand Chardonnays. The food batch that winemaker Ben Byrne recommended is roast chicken or seafood, shellfish or crayfish, particularly, or creamy fish dishes. So those are the perfect matches according to Ben. Right now, I've got time to answer 2 questions, a budget to answer 2 questions. I'm looking for, I think before I go to questions from the webinar, in advance of the webinar, I got sent some questions by David Strata, who was until recently the market manager for New Zealand wine growers in North America. David's a good friend of mine, and he's held that position for 20 years. Now he's retired, and he says New Zealand built its reputation on Sauvignon Blanc that was mostly a blend of vineyards and even sub-regions. Astrolabe Taihoe is a single vineyard wine. How is that different in the glass? Well, I don't think the fact that it's a single vineyard is I mean, it's producing a small, more specific wine that is connected to a smaller place than a wine that might be blended from vineyards across all of Marlborough, which reflects once again a place, but the larger Marlborough region rather than the smaller Taihoa region. I just think that single vineyards, just have more specificity, have more more connection to terroir. And he also says, the world is awash with brilliant Chardonnays. How can we gain respect for the variety internationally? Is New Zealand getting over the heavily oaked style of Chardonnay? And I have to say, firstly, the heavily oaked thing, we are definitely getting over that. More and more wineries are going to larger oak and older oak, and really backing off that big oaky style, although there is a market for it as well. And gaining respect of the variety internationally, I think a good, we can do it by letting our wines be tasted alongside benchmarks like the Kumu River Chardonnay tasting that was featured in A Place at the Table documentary recently, which is that sort of exposure is going to really put New Zealand on the world Chardonnay map and create good demand for our wines. I've probably got time for one more. John Church says, can you taste the sea in both of these wines, Bob? It's like putting a shell to your ear. You can hear the sea. I don't know about the sea, but I get in both of them, I get a saline character. So like a slightly salty character, which I guess is the sea. I call it oyster shell. So yes. And there's another quick one we might have time for from Duncan Edwards. Chardonnays seem to be taking over in popularity again. Do you think this is fair? Can the Sauvignon Blancs hold their own? Well, each to their own. Well, the Sauvignon Blanc lovers can enjoy their favorite wine. I don't think it needs to be a crossover. I don't think it's going to. I don't think Chardonnay is going to undermine Sauvignon's popularity at all, particularly in the export markets where people identify very much with New Zealand Sauvignon. It's become an absolute, almost an iconic wine style. So yeah, I don't think Sauvignon is under threat from Chardonnay. Well, let's go now to the next wine, which is another Chardonnay from 2019, Villa Maria Single Vineyard Kelton Chardonnay from Hawke's Bay, and that has a retail price of $79.99. Excuse me. It's from east of the Marae-Kakaho region, and there's a cool air that drains from the mountains to the west and keeps the sort of temperature down a little bit to get more vibrant flavors and fresh, add freshness to the wines. The soils are silt loams over red metals with large free graining gravel stones, and the vines are up to 22 years old, pruned to yield 6 to 7 tons per hectare, which is quite low if in European terms, 45 hectoliters per hectare which is fairly modest. Kelton's really gaining cult status, and Villamaria have sort of showing it off as their flagship Chardonnay, and it's become, as I said, something of a cult since it was first produced. And its signature is it has a signature gunflinty character that divides opinion. Some people absolutely love it, and others find it a little too much. But I'm generally in favour of it, as long as it doesn't sort of dominate other flavours. I think, to me, one of the most outstanding features of the Kelton is its concentration, and within that concentration, there are quite a lot of different flavours. So it's got this built-in complexity as well. One of those is this struck flint or gunpowder character. Let's have a look at it. Seems a shame to tip away all these lovely wines, doesn't it? Plenty of colour. Got a great nose. Very concentrated, sort of getting apple and how can you smell fresh? I guess I'm smelling things that could be described as fresh. Bright citrus flavors. Well, that's delicious. The features that appeal to me are the concentration of it, the balance of the wine. It's got this wonderful, initially you get just a touch of fruit sweetness, fruit and alcohol sweetness, and then toward the end it dries up and leaves that sort of a rather nice, crisp, mouth-watering finish. It's got but they're absolutely perfectly in harmony. You don't think it's too sweet or too acidic. They just work together really well. It's got a lovely texture, a great richness. Yes, there is a touch of oak there, but it's not obvious, and certainly not excessive. It contributes to the wine's rich tapestry. I think that's absolutely delicious. So well done. I gave this 95 points, which was 8th out of 51 Chardonnays from Hawke's Bay. And winemaker Nick Piccone, who's a seafood fan, thinks that a dream combo here would be crayfish ravioli with a lovely rich bisque sauce. Kelton's intensity and acidity would be a great foil for the richness and butteriness of the dish. Nick's lives in Hawke's Bay and absolutely lives for Chardonnay, and is a huge fan of Hawke's Bay Chardonnay, naturally enough. Okay, now we're moving on to we're going to the red wine. We're going to Pinot Noir, 2019 Akarua Pinot Noir from Central Otago. That's got a retail price of $45. Let me get that on front of you. I think this could be the most decorated New Zealand Pinot Noir ever. It just seems to pick up trophies every year and gold medals, bucket loads of them, and it appears to me anyway to have sort of dominated or come out well in just about every wine competition going. It's just got that. It's got that consistently consistent style. The hallmarks are this lovely soft texture and really beautiful fruit flavor, very seductive fruit flavor. Competitors might scoff and say, "Oh, it's a fruit bomb style," and I think there is a bit of that in it, but it's just wonderfully, just a delicious wine. It's from Bannockburn, which I once described as the sweet spot of Central Otago Pinot Noir country, and 68%. It's from several vineyards, and Akarua have been putting a lot of money into buying some new and exciting vineyards, established vineyards in really in that Cromwell Basin area. And the one around the vineyard that they've had they started with around the winery in Bannockburn, 68% of this wine is made up of grapes from that vineyard, and that's a northwest sloping glacial terrace, 23-year-old vines, which is getting on for for New Zealand vines. So it's got a lot going for it. There are 5 other vineyards in rather smaller doses that are in this wine as well. The grapes are all destemmed, which is interesting because it's now becoming quite almost de rigueur to ferment on some of the stems in order to build up a little bit of complexity, spicy characters, structure to give the wine more backbone, if you like, and possibly longevity. So they're choosing not to go that route, but to just focus on the fruit, whole fruit, nothing but the fruit, and that's really what tends to come through with their wines. 70% wild yeast fermentation, and it's matured in 11 months in French barriques. 27% of them are new, so that's sort of about the average oak exposure, I would say, for Central Otago Pinot Noir. Let's have a taste of it now. Switch of glasses. Oh gosh. It is I would describe it as a restrained fruit bomb style. Great texture, that lovely, sumptuous, rich, intensely fruity wine is really seductive. Gosh, it's just building in my mouth as I speak. I'm getting sort of plum and dark cherries and violet and thyme. The vineyards are covered in wild thyme, and you sometimes get that sort of aromatic thyme character to the wine. I think that's just absolutely delicious. It's easy to understand why it's a crowd pleaser in wine shows. A judge's favorite, I guess. I gave that 95 points, and it ranked 10th out of 73 Pinot Noirs from Central Otago. Winemaker Andrew Keenleyside picks his favorite food match as confit quail with Jerusalem artichoke puree, which sounds delicious. I've had Jerusalem artichoke puree, but never confit quail. So I'll give that a go at some stage. Now we're going to have a couple of questions. Firstly, I'll deal with David Strada's questions. He said, it's great to see the inclusion of a 2010 Pinot Noir. What can be said about the ageability of New Zealand Pinot Noir under screw cap? Should everyone be doing it? Well, I don't know. I think there's an increasing amount of evidence, to me at least, that favours Pinot Noir under screw cap. But Diversity is good, and there's some jolly good wines under cork around too, and DM as well. Pinot Noir does perform well under screw cap, but that doesn't prohibit using corks and DM. I think it's still relatively early days. I think screw cap has just turned 20, so we've had 20 years experience now. But in my experience, they more than double the drinking window of white wines and may do the same with reds. And I've recently had a tasting of screw cap versus cork under not Pinot Noir, but under a Syrah and a Cabernet Merlot blend. And I liked them both equally, but they were very different wines, screw cap to cork. You get the screw cap wine tends to be fresher and brighter, and the cork wine tends to be richer and more evolved. And it's been a struggle to choose a winner. So on the basis of that evidence, it's probably I can't give screw caps such a ringing endorsement. All right, we've also got a question from Ruth Church. Hi, Bob, how does the thyme get infused into the wine? Now, I'm not sure about that. I've asked the question of winemakers and had various answers, but I think it's, we know that from the Australian Wine Research Institute that eucalypt, the eucalypt character gets into grapes and hence to wine by oils from the tree getting onto the grapes and then being harvested and going through the system. Perhaps a similar thing with thyme. I don't know whether they produce oils or whether the aroma is an essence of some sort, but I guess it just gets on the grapes and into the wine. But I'm not sure. I will find out, Ruth, and get back to you on that one. Okay, let's go to the next wine now, which is 2018 Coxs Vineyard Pinot Noir from Central Otago, and that has a retail price of $60. This is new to me. I've only just tasted Cox's Vineyard wine, I think, for the first time just a couple of months ago. It's a family-owned vineyard in Gibbston in Central Otago. That's the cooler region of Gibbston. And they were 15 years as grape growers, supplying Peregrine, Maud, Burn Cottage and Takapoto Estate, all top producers. So that's a good sign. The first vintage under the Cox's label was 2015, and it's now run by the founder's son, Simon, and wife, Lee. So they've handed the reins over, and we now have a sort of second generation winery, which is nice to see in New Zealand. We don't get as much succession as they do perhaps in Europe. 2018 was the hottest vintage on record in Central Otago, and caused a little bit of a concern. People thought, I wondered if they're going to lose aromatics or certainly acids with the extra heat, but it's turned out very well. I think the 2018s I've tried so far have been generally of a reasonably high standard. They used 28% whole bunches in the ferment, and they kept the concentration by dropping yields to 4.5 tons per hectare, which is 30 hectolitres a hectare, which is a very low yield. That's a sort of equivalent to a Premier Cru Burgundy or something like that. That's a tiny yield, and no doubt plays a significant part in the quality of their wine. Let's have a taste of it. Well, here we go. Ooh, dark cherries, brambles, dried herbs, mixed spice, a lot going on there. lovely sweet fruit and a sort of silky texture really adds a lot of appeal to that wine. I love the complexity. It's just got so many little nuances of flavor. It doesn't fit my stereotype image of Gibston Pinot Noir, which is rather cool climate and very herby and very almost grassy. I wonder whether climate change seems to be favouring cool regions like Gibston and producing more sumptuous wines, more riper styles generally. An interesting trend. I like this a lot, and I gave it 96 points, and it ranked third out of 129 2018 Pinot Noirs from Central Otago. So that's a pretty good effort for a. I don't think 18 was the first vintage, but one of the first vintages by Coxs. Food match. Winemaker Sean Brennan says wild Gibston venison. He's obviously a hunter. I've yet to try wild Gibston venison, but with Sean's help, I look forward to doing exactly that. Now we've got wine 6, and that is 2010 Pegasus Bay Prima Donna aged release Pinot Noir with a price tag of $120. 2010 was a sort of warm, dry, no pressure vintage, so it was a very good vintage that let the winemakers pick exactly when it was best for the fruit. This is from a vineyard on north-facing terraces, sheltered by the Teviotdale Range in Waipara, so that shelters from the sea, and makes it drier and warmer, which is what they want for grapes, of course. The vines are over 30 years old and most on their own roots. That's quite interesting because, well, vine age gives consistency and concentration, and 30 years is certainly getting on a bit. But on their own roots, most vines, to avoid getting killed by the root louse phylloxera, they have to graft the stock onto American rootstock, which are resistant to phylloxera. And there is a strong field of thought, a group of people that believe that own root wines without being grafted actually produce better wine than grafted vines. It's an interesting thesis that I'm trying to gather information on to see if there's any validity to it. It's on free draining, low fertile soils that also reduces vine vigor and once again adds to concentration and complexity. And Pegasus Bay certainly have a reputation for producing very concentrated wines. Warm days and cool nights extend the ripening and retain acidity and flavor. So that's a good grape growing climate. The Prima Donna is their flagship Pinot Noir, and they create it by taking the best barrels from the oldest vines, so it just gets the cream of the crop, and that's what elevates the status of it. 1/3 of the wine is fermented on whole bunches, so I've talked about that, and 18 months in barrel, which is quite a lot for Pinot, and 40% new. So that's a fair wallop of oak, but don't forget it's backed up by a fair wallop of fruit. Let's have a look. I should have actually put this up there. Right. Looking forward to this. Yeah, certainly got the Peg Bay concentration. Lovely nose. Really, a really delicious texture. Not creamy. It's got a bit more backbone than that, but it's just a lovely wine to feel rather than just taste. And once again, layers and layers of flavor. A little bit of forest flory bottle development creeping in, which really adds to the wine's rich tapestry. I'm getting the usual sort of plums and cherries, and there's still a lot of primary fruit flavors. This is a relatively youthful wine, but it's had its edges all knocked off, I guess, by bottle age, and it's just, I just keep going back to the texture. It's just really a delicious wine to taste. Oh, I might get that put to one side for dinner tonight. I gave that 97 points, and it's the first place in 36 2010 Pinot Noirs from Waipara. Ed Donaldson, who I think runs the marketing at the family winery, recommends a food match of confit duck, lamb rack with mushrooms compote, beef and mushroom casserole. So those are three choices. They're not a medley of on one dish. So that's worth trying. Now, we need to. I need to answer a couple of questions, and I'll start once again with David Strada. He says the wines that are coming, two wines ahead of us now, Homage and Trinity Hill Homage, Syrah and Coleraine, are both young. What about them indicates that they will evolve and improve? If so, for how long? And what's the effect of the closure? Well, that's interesting because the Homage is a screw cap, and the Coleraine is a diam, which is like a cork, but they grind up cork, treat it to remove the TCA, the chemical that causes cork taint, and then glue it into a cork form. So they get a more consistent product without perhaps the malleability of cork, and it's been embraced by quite a few winemakers who are dissatisfied with natural cork. Of course, natural cork's going through a revolution too of improvement, mainly removing the cork taint threat. So how will they improve? Well, I've been doing some trials on screw cap versus cork for 20 years, and as I said earlier this evening, there really is we need a little bit more time, especially for these bigger, longer aged wines. But the early suggestion, the early indication is that screw caps are going to probably double the window, more than double the window for wines when compared to cork. But they're going to produce different wines. So cork or screw cap, the jury's out for me. I think we probably need another. I'll probably need another 20 years, if I've got another 20 years, to come up with a definitive, to make an absolutely definitive statement on that. There's too many variables. So sorry, David, and thanks for the question. Have we got any? Oh, we have. Poppy Open. What percentage of wine do New Zealand export to Australia? Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I don't have that. I don't have that on hand at the moment, but I think Australia ranks as our second or third. Now, as our third most lucrative export destination. I'm pretty sure of that. But if you'd like to email me, I will give you the exact percentage. No problem at all there. It'll take me a second to find it. And once again from John, late release wines. Do you think there will be an increasing trend in New Zealand? Yes, that's the Pegasus Bay is a late release wine, and that they're demonstrating to people who buy it, to their customers, that good wines, serious long-term wines, deserve to be aged, and there's a lot to be gained by it. And I think they're making a very good point. I think a number of wineries now are doing it. I'm thinking of Dog Point, Villa Maria. Well, there's quite a few more are starting to re-release old wines like that at a premium, and so they should apply a premium. And I think it's great. It's and it will increase. I think early. If I look at my early days in New Zealand, in the New Zealand wine industry, my experience of it anyway, the wines were improving year by year so rapidly that if you held a wine back here, released it in 10 years, it's become it's so far behind, it can't keep up. Any improvement in quality through maturation is going to be less than just an evolution of winemaking quality. So it wasn't possible to do that. And I think the fact that it is now possible to do that, it is now possible to hold wine back for 10 years, as Pegasus Bay have, and re-release it, demonstrates that that we've a sort of maturity in New Zealand winemaking, and perhaps we're starting to sort of plateau in terms of the sort of quality development. Anyway, good sign. Well done, Pegasus Bay. Okay. Now we're going to Trinity Hill Homage Syrah from Hawke's Bay. Starting to get a bit of a stretch for me. And that's got a retail price of $150. And that's Homage Syrah is Trinity Hill's flagship Syrah, flagship wine, really. I think that's their signature wine, if you'd like to call it that. I should start by saying it's not 100% Syrah. It has 2% Viognier, and that's a technique that's I guess was started in the Northern Rhone and Côte Rôtie particularly, and they found that by co-fermenting white Viognier grapes, just a small percentage, with Syrah, you actually get a more aromatic wine, a softer textured wine, and curiously, a deeper color, because somehow the Viognier fixes the tannins, the anthocyanins that produce the color in red wine. So you actually get a deeper color, which is quite interesting. I've talked to winemakers here who've used Syrah Viognier co-ferments in the marketplace, and they said it confuses people if they put Viognier as well as Syrah on the front label. So now you often don't see any reference to Viognier, and there's nothing on the label here to reference to Viognier. So no doubt the website talks all about it, but so people want to buy Syrah, you know. It's had 25% whole bunches, which they say contributes to freshness, aromatic, and structure. I've talked a little bit about that already. They've been as high in the past as 100%, which produced a pretty big and very tannic wine. It'll be very interesting to see how it ages. But I think 25%, in my experience, is seems to be a more reasonable percentage. 14 months in new and older French oak, plus large 5,000 litre ovals to not give it too much oak exposure. I should explain the Homage is a reference to some cuttings that Gerard Jabelet from Jabelet Wines in the Rhone gave to John Hancock, who was then a shareholder in Trinity Hill, and after he'd worked a vintage at Jabelet, and they became quite good friends, and then Gerard later died, and but gave some cuttings to John to bring back to New Zealand and propagate. And those cuttings were planted in 2001. So it's a nice way to remember a generous gesture and a very charming French gentleman. So well done, Trinity Hill. Now let's try the wine. Very aromatic. That's lovely. It's just really, it speaks of berries and flowers. That's absolutely delicious. A very elegant wine. The two extremes, elegant and blockbuster. It's probably, if there's elegance here and blockbusters here, it probably falls about there. Lovely, lovely wine. Very accessible, surprisingly, for 2018, which was not a bad vintage in Hawke's Bay, but yeah, absolutely delicious. It's got a slightly minerally edge to it that I think is particularly attractive. I gave that 96 points and scored 6 out of 52 2018 Syrahs from Hawke's Bay, and it has I mentioned that. So that's a wine that you could enjoy now. In fact, I may have a glass with dinner tonight. And but if you had the willpower to put it away and forget about it for, you don't have to give it 30 years, which I'm sure it'll do. But 5 or 10 years, it would just be a wonderful experience to open something after that time. To open the wine after that time, it would certainly improve it, I'm sure. But it's just lovely now. Right. And finally, a bit of a drum roll here. Finally, it's 2019 Tomato Coleraine from Hawke's Bay. I almost feel it's sort of a wine that needs no introduction. It has a retail price of $120. We planned on tasting the 2018 vintage here, but I was down in Hawke's Bay a few weeks ago, and I just called into Tomato at their invitation and was able to taste the 2019, which they're very excited about, as it came off the bottling line. So they bottled it that day, and that's when I tasted it. And normally that knocks wine around, being forced through metal tubes and so forth. But they were generously, they were happy for me to try it, and it was a pleasure to taste. And so I twisted their arm to see if we could get the 2019 tonight instead. It's a blend of 59% Cabernet Sauvignon with lesser amounts of Merlot and Cabernet Franc. It is, in my opinion, New Zealand's most iconic wine. And to qualify as most iconic wine, it's international. It's got a great international reputation. It's being produced for quite a significant amount of time. Since 1982 was the first vintage, and it's just you know, highly demanded and even revered, I have to say, by wine lovers everywhere. So it really is a standout in that respect. It's originally a single vineyard wine, and now it's from distinct plots from the oldest vineyards on the Havelock Hills owned by Tamata. It's a wine, I guess, for collectors and investors, but also for wine lovers on special occasions and so forth. It's you know, I have a few treasured bottles of Coleraine in my cellar, and you know, the sort of wines that you're probably going to keep too long because you just can't resist. You can't force yourself to open them. That's how I am anyway. 2019 was a top vintage in Hawke's Bay, and that's really reflected in the wine. It's when I tasted it, it was I just thought it was outstanding. But I'll tell you, I also tried the Awatea, which is Coleraine's lieutenant, and I think that was just an absolutely gorgeous, lush, really intensely fruity wine. I'd say at a fraction of the price. It would be, I would buy the Awatea for current consumption over the next few years anyway, and the Coleraine for the long-term consumption. Let me remember what it tasted like. Oh, I thought it was DM. Sorry, it's not. It's a natural cork, not DM at all. Oh, deliciously, intensely ripe cassis and dark berry flavors with a subtle seasoning of spice. This is sort of elegance on a grand scale. Absolutely delicious. It's surprisingly attractive now, but has a great future ahead of it. This could be one of the best ever Coleraines until 2020, which is reputed to be a vintage that's going to challenge 2019. That's just delicious. It's a lovely wine, wonderful texturally. It really works. Great length, subtle power, just harmonious, integrated, lovely wine. And I gave it 98 points, and I don't have the ranking here, but that's a pretty solid score from from me. The food match mentioned by recommended by winemaker Phil Brody is melt in your mouth slow cooked beef short rib, buttery mashed vegetables, and some braised mushrooms with roast beetroot salad on the side. Now, if that doesn't make you want to dash to the kitchen, nothing will. That all sounds fantastic to me. Questions. We've got time for a couple more questions, and I've got a couple on the board. With these big New Zealand reds at the price tag, I assume I need to cellar these for maximum enjoyment. And that's Ruth. Simple answer, really, yes. But it is delicious now. I mean, if I was happy to buy a case or a half case or whatever, I would want to taste one to know what I was sitting on. And then having had that bottle, I'd probably want to have another one fairly soon, just to remind myself of what I was sitting on. And I'll tell you what, within a year, they'd probably be all gone. So I suppose there's some merit in not tasting it to know what you're actually sitting on. How does Coleraine, this is from Jong Tech, is it? Jong Tech. How does Coleraine compare with Le Sol generally? Well, Le Sol's Syrah So there is a varietal difference there, but they both represent wines, the signature wines of two wineries that are very focused on producing nothing but the absolute best. So from that point of view, from the quality perspective, they're in the same league, but stylistically they're a little different because of the grape variety mix. And and that's it. So before we go, I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I've certainly enjoyed the wines, and I hope you had a chance to try at least one or two of them, perhaps. But it's been fun from my perspective, and the fun will continue when I decide what I'm going to have for dinner. And just so thank you for joining me. And if you're not a subscriber to The Real Review, now's a good time to change that. And don't forget to go to our Cellar Door-to-Door website, and also order direct from the winery. Tune in again on Thursday, 4th of March, for a journey through New South Wales with Hugh and Hawke, and that promises to be a terrific webinar. So join Hugh on the 4th of March, journey through New South Wales. Thank you.